Welcome to this event commemorating the 30th anniversary of the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit with women co-founders of the environmental justice movement. This is sponsored by the Great Cities Institute. So on behalf of Great Cities at the University of Illinois at Chicago, I welcome you, along with our co-sponsor, Jose Bravo, and the Just Transition Alliance. We're happy that you're here. We're gonna make this pretty free-flowing. We've got a number of questions that we're posing to these wonderful women, who all of whom were attendees at the First National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C., and all of whom, both prior to that summit and since that summit for the last 30 years, have continued their environmental justice work against environmental racism. We're going to begin by honoring women who are also co-founders and part of this this really remarkable event, and I'm going to turn it over to Jose Bravo to introduce him to not only welcome and also to do this tribute.
Thank you, Teresa. So it is an honor of mine to introduce this tribute, to acknowledge the fact that, you know, some of our leaders have passed away, and at the same time keep on, helping construct the movement by their legacy and the legacy that they left behind. So many of you know some of those folks on the picture: Hazel Johnson, Jean Gauna, Wilma Mankiller. Help me out with the.
That would you believe that's Dana?
Dana Austin, Jean Sindab, and Connie Tucker. So there's been more people that have passed away, but ultimately, you know, we're looking at folks that were at the 30th anniversary and helped us create this road to where we're at the moment. So I wanted just to make sure that everybody got an understanding of the tribute that we're putting together, and also would help us in honoring their memory.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jose.
Pam, did you have a comment? I thought I heard you turn.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we thought about, should we do a big tribute? And then we thought, well, no, we'll just all end up in tears if we do that. And by the way, these earrings that I'm wearing, these actually were Jean Gauna's earrings. Her children gave me these earrings, so I put those on when I want to be my warrior woman self. So these are women that we love and remember. I want to point out also in this picture with Dana Alston, in the background there is Rosemary Augustine, who is still with us. You notice her name is on the flyers. We couldn't reach her. We think it's because of health issues. She was a big warrior in Tucson around the CBEs and the poisoning of folks over there. And but we got in a little tribute to her as well. Though, as I said, she is still with us.
And I think that's a bearded Antonio Diaz. Behind them, or next to them.
Right on. Okay, so I think the first question I think is mine. And not everyone's going to answer every question, but we're going to have as many folks as we can. Oh, I should mention, we've got one more participant. Well, let me do this quick introductions. I didn't do that. We have with us Pam Tali, Mililani Trask, Gail Small, Mildred McLean, Susana Almanza. Obviously, you all have seen their bios. That's why you're here. We're expecting any minute now Bernice Miller Chavez. She is stuck in traffic in New York City, but she will be joining us shortly. So here's the first question. Actually, it is your question, Jose.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
So why was the summit important to you? Can you explain something that, that basically describes why it was important to you? And go ahead and speak up.
Take a crack at it at first. For me, it was at the beginning of the Harambe House Citizens for Environmental Justice getting its feet into specifically the environmental justice work, the environmental work around dismantling racism. And what it did was it gave us a platform to introduce to the nation the problems that we who were living around what are called federal facilities, these sites that were a part of the nuclear weapons production gang. It gave us an opportunity to really expose what was going on, not only in Georgia and South Carolina, because we're about 125 miles downstream from the Savannah River site, but our brothers and sisters who lived around Los Alamos in New Mexico, Hanford, out in Washington, Rocky Flats out in Colorado, Oak Ridge over in Tennessee, Kentucky, and all of those places, because for the most part, a lot of the work was being done around us being exposed from industrial facilities. And very few of us, or just a handful of us, particularly from the Black community, was trying to bring to light what was going on in our communities as it related to the nuclear weapons production cycle, from the cradle to the grave, the transportation issues, the storage issues. We woke up one morning just before the summit when 20,000 picocuries of radioactive tritium had spilled from the Savannah River site down river to Savannah. And we didn't even know what a picocurie was, let alone what tritium was. We definitely didn't know how to spell it. And so it gave us entree into a national conversation, but it allowed us to find family and like minds to join with, to really fight, because we thought, we're up against the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense and the Department of Interior. Those are big guys. They trump the industrial facilities, although that's not to say the petrochemicals, they're killing us too. But it gave us that opportunity to bring attention to what was happening to Indigenous people, Black people, Latin people, and it gave us an opportunity to come together and join together to work to change what was going on. So that's why it was important to me. And then secondly, and I'll shut up, is that it allowed us to raise the issue of young people being involved in the movement, talking about intergenerational struggle. And it was there where we tried to bring young people and encourage their voices. And they actually tried to take over the second summit. So we had made some progress. So that's why it was important to us. It gave the Southern voice to what was happening around nuclear weapons.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. McLean. I think that was a great explanation of what it meant to you. I want to really quickly introduce, just wave Bernice. Bernice Miller-Travis has joined us. She's one of our panelists as well. So I'll call on Pam next.
Before you do that, let me also just take note, Jose, real quickly, that we're really also happy to note that Hazel Johnson's daughter, Cheryl Johnson, is also one of the, she's in the, an audience member. So Cheryl, really glad that you're here also with us. All right, go ahead, Jose, back to you.
Yeah, so I want to switch it on over to Pam and see, why was the summit important to you?
Well, for me, honestly, the full impact and the importance, it was actually when I walked into the room and saw everybody and checked out the program guide and all of the work that went into crafting the summit. Oh my gosh, the impact of that was amazing. I was one of 30 Asians and Pacific Islanders who was invited to participate in the summit. And for me, what I was asked to do by Dana and from Charles was to be able to draft an initial policy paper regarding occupational health and safety. And again, I drafted that paper, and it was discussed and contributed to the principles. But what was in terms of importance for me was when Dana and the summit redefined environment to where we live, work, play, pray, go to school, and pray. And I did not realize the importance that uplifting where we work. And it just blew me away. And to be able to have a place, a space where everybody was united around that redefinition was very powerful for me. And finally, the importance in walking in that room and seeing everybody and hearing everybody's stories from all around the country in terms of the health impacts, the devastation of the land, the plunder. I will put in the chat. It was an affirmation of a Asian radical perspective. A group of us back in 1969 who were affiliated with a radical Chinatown organization called Iwakun and the Red Guard. We had as one of our platform principles demand that I'll read it. We demand that the United States government halt the rape of the land. We believe that greedy businessmen, with the help of the US government, do not destroy our land, air, water, ocean, streams. The earth will become a lifeless planet of rock and dust. And for me, this was an affirmation of some of us in Chinatown. And it was just very, I think the connectedness that Mildred talked about, I just felt it was so real. And I really appreciate everybody who made that happen.
Yeah, thank you for that, Pam. That's very, very important. And I know that Dr. McLean is still with Harambe House. What are you doing now, Pam? Really quickly.
What am I doing now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my health has not been very good, so I've kind of I'm kind of like an environmental justice busybody, and I've turned to art. I've got some art here. Been using art as a way to uplift and bring to life some of the issues that I care about regarding environment. And one of the things that I'm really trying to focus in now is exposing false solutions, such as market-based solutions, bringing that to light as well. So, yeah, I've been painting and
very
doing what
important.
I can.
Well, you know, on our website on the blog, there's actually a link to some of her paintings if you want to check that out.
Yeah, very important work. Thank you for doing that. And you're also retired, Pam. From the LOHP, from the Labor Occupational Health Program. All right, we'll switch on over to Mililani. Maybe if you start out by saying what you're doing now and then go into the question of what did the summit, why was the summit important to you?
One of the things I'm doing now at 70 is I'm working with another of our speakers, Gail Small, to do a mentoring one-on-one project where you have a legacy leader, someone who is older, an older woman, working with a younger Native woman who is designated a future legacy leader, so that we can continue using the skills that we've acquired at gatherings such as this, but most importantly, so that we can continue the intergenerational transmission of knowledge, not only traditional knowledge, but knowledge relating to critical matters such as environmental protection and our ongoing quest for environmental justice. I continue to dabble in a number of issues. Of course, we're still struggling as we were back then when we first met with the toxicity that arises from US military industrial complex activities. And because Hawaii is the home of the US Indo-Pacific Fleet, we continue to suffer from the impacts of the multinational military partnerships that unfortunately do have a continuing and negative impact on our environment. But when I recall the work that we did many years ago, I still consider it to be one of the most significant gatherings that has ever occurred. And it was very important to me, and I dare say the entire Pacific region, because of who we are and where we are. We're small little islands in the largest region of the world, the Pacific Basin. We are not all one indigenous culture, but because of colonization, we've been lumped together with Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia. And when you look at the indigenous profile in all these places, woefully inadequate education, at the time, very little connectivity. And I hate to tell you that in many of the areas of Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia, we still have places where they don't have connectivity. So very alienated, but yet dealing with the largest polluters in the world, government, military, as well as multinational. So this is why this gathering was very critical to those who came from the Pacific, and we reaped a great benefit that we continue to reap today. We went there as small little island native peoples. We met the leaders of the environmental justice from across the United States and globally. The networks that we formed there serve us to this very day. We went there with a handful of people. We came back with a long list of supportive organizations. Some were indigenous, some were not. Some were church-based, some were government-based. But one of the great things we achieved in coming forward with a platform for environmental justice was that it was all inclusive. We spoke in terms of all communities, all peoples. So the divisiveness, are you indigenous or not? Are you Polynesian, or are you from Africa or Asia? Those kinds of things were discarded in our initial gathering, and we spoke in terms of all communities, all peoples. We addressed the difference between men and women, parents and children, those who were Black and those who were white. All of that was overcome with language of inclusivity. And for many who don't know, it had a significant impact on how the cases were brought in the US. Early on, the Sierra Club had gone to court. Why? To defend the trees that were being hewed down like rubbish and converted into commodities. When they went to court for the trees. Well, they got thrown right out because the court in America said, well, trees don't have any rights. And that was a judicial determination that struck us globally. Well, we had to turn that around, didn't we? And what emerged and was thereafter clarified by our 17-point statement was what that link was between those who live on the earth, our mother, and those who view it as a commodity. And as a result of losing that case, with the support of the Statement on Environmental Justice, there could be no debate of the human rights link between people and the earth itself. When we went there were a few talking environmental justice, but it was like a pebble cast in a still pond. Ripples went out to all shores globally. Today, that phrase, environmental justice, turns heads. Governments as well as industry know what it means. And today, because of what we started there, We have many more options to address environmental toxicity and also to advance it. One thing I wanted to point out was that this conference happened many years ago. We did not pass the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the World's 500 million plus indigenous peoples until 2007. And when you read that document, you can see the links between our people's human rights and environmental justice. It serves us to this day.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Melanie. That was beautiful. And I just want to give the opportunity to our other three panelists to answer this, but just be very concise and short because we have 7 questions and we want to get to all those questions. So thank you. Let's go with Susana and then Vernice, or no, pardon, Susana, Gail, and then Vernice, please.
Good afternoon, and I'm very honored to be here with so many powerful women and people who are a part of the environmental justice movement. And as for that, we first want to recognize the land that we're meeting on today, that is belong to a lot of the indigenous people, but specifically the Apache here in Texas, the Alabama Coshada tribe in Texas, the Kickapoo tribe in Texas, the Yeleta de Sur Pueblo, the Lipin Apache tribe, the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians, and the Guayatecans. And also want to recognize that this is a home to the Caddo, Comanche, Kiowa, Wichita, Chickasaw, and Waco nations. And we honor and thank the indigenous peoples connected to this territory where we gather and give gratitude to the land of which we meet, because I think that that is what our struggle has always been about, is that indigenous people and our right to the land and our right to self-determination. And it was something very great to be able to attend the First National People of Color, because great voices from different perspectives from people of color and their culture coming together is so unique when that happens. And not only that, but also sharing the historical experiences that we have gone through, because so much people would think they were the only ones being polluted. They were the only ones being contaminated. But yet when they came together, they realized that this was a struggle that was happening throughout the United States, and a struggle that was happening to communities of color. And you could always tell where they were. You either lay next to the highway or next to the train track, and downstream from where the water flowed, because they always looked at topography when they decided where people of color were going to live also. So in that First National People of Color was also being able to not just talk about the contamination in the industries and the corporations that were impacting our health and our environment, but also sharing strategies, sharing knowledge of how to address these specific issues. And I think one of the other big issues was, how do we address a national agenda on environmental justice? And how do we then go and do international issues on environmental justice? And coming from Texas and also bordering with Mexico was the whole issue of the maquiladoras. Because at first, that took on the high-tech industry along with SNEED and 5 other states, but also looking at when the United States decided that they would move the most dangerous and hazardous and most contaminated facilities to Mexico, to Asia, to different places, right? And then at the same time, NAFTA was going, North American Free Trade, and then it was flowing through. So then we were also looking at national policy and really international, because there were other countries involved in the whole issue of NAFTA. So being able to, I say, locally, grassroots, looking at issues, but connecting through national and international, and how we were all being impacted, and how our health and our environment, right, when we talk about our Mother Earth, when we talk about the interconnecting between nature and humanity, and that it was interwoven, interlocked, and couldn't be separated. And I think that the environmental justice movement was such powerful, because we redefined what the environment was. we redefined it was not just nature, it was nature and humanity together. And I think that that was one of the biggest successes that we had as people of color, right? Working together to redefine the environment, and how that went from states, regions, national, and international scope of people redefining what the environment. I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest success when you think about it. People no longer think the environment is just nature. People automatically know that the environment is nature and humanity, and you can't separate them. You can't deal with them separately. So I think that those few things to me was something that I was also expecting, that I was also hoping to move forward, coming from an area where I went through the civil rights movement, the Brown Beret movement, the Chicano movement. I knew the importance of meeting together across states, across regions, how important that it was to network. And so the first National People of Color Summit was one of the most beautiful experiences I have ever experienced in my life, and continue living that path today.
Right.
And
Thank you so
can I just
much.
add real quickly too, that Sylvia Herrera, who is with your with El Poder, is on the call too.
Yes.
So I want to give her a big shout out.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Please take it away, Gail. Your mic is off, Gail.
Ishib. Greetings. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. It's good to see you. Been a long time. It's kind of emotional seeing the pictures of our sisters at the beginning. You know, I think the most important thing for me from attending the Leadership Summit was really creating a family of each and every one of you, plus all those that have journeyed on and those that are not pictured here. You know, we've seen the work that we continue to do. You know, I'm continuing the work with lifting up the Indigenous knowledge of elder women, trying to pass that knowledge on, particularly in the United States and Canada. And that's the work I still do. I'm still very engaged in my tribe. I've done a stint at teaching in the universities. And probably some of the best work I've done is teaching in the tribal colleges. All of our reservations, you know, have tribal colleges, and they're really the centers of intelligence that move our tribes forward in the United States. I would also like to say that Dana Alston was my roommate at this convening. You know, we were all had no money, we're all struggling just to get there. And so we all bunked up in motel rooms with each other. And so Dana was my roommate, and I got to be very close to our sister. And she gave the keynote, as you'll recall, as Pam expressed, that was really a call to action. And she stayed up most of that night. Her and I were up mostly all night. She'd wake me up and she'd say, I'm going to read this to you. Tell me what you think. Is this too harsh? Is this too hard? And so we spent most of the night, and it was really our dialoguing that night when she said, let's do a call out. You know, if we're ever going to do a call out to the racism of the Big 10 environmental organizations, it's now. And the power, the strength of us coming together enabled us to do that. You know, finally have a voice and say the Sierra Club, you know, all of the Big 10 environmental organizations, you know, where are us on your boards? Where are the brown attorneys? Where are the Black attorneys? Why is none of the work that you're doing in our communities? And then we talked about, you know, Dana and I visited that night about how we live. We live off the land. We're subsistence people. We still, you know, gather our roots, our berries. We depend on the elk, the deer, the migration of animals. We live in balance. The ceremonies that we lift up, we believe truly that we renew the world. We renew the world in our ceremonies, something that is so difficult for Western world to understand. So bringing together all of us was like-minded people. Like Susanna said, our thinking of the environment is not silo, it's broad. And so just reaffirming our thinking among each other. And it was like elevating our thinking to the level that we know our knowledge is real. All of you know that. And that what will it take to get the greater world to understand that everything has to live in balance. And so it was creating that family nexus of the Leadership Summit that propelled me to go about my life's work of inclusivity, trying to be inclusive. I'm the person that works with the white environmentalists. I'm that person that works with the white government. I've always been that designee from my tribe. Gail, you go work with them. You understand how they think better. And so I've always been that person that tries to include everyone. And I tell you what, it's a hard road, but knowing that all of you do that has been helpful. So with that, I want to thank all the organizers for pulling this together. It's really good to see each and every one of you.
Thank you, Gail. That's very, very important. Last, but certainly not least on this first question, Bernice Miller Travis.
Never least.
Yes.
Well, greetings to all my sisters. So much has been said. The most important thing I want to say is how deeply connected I am to all of these people, and how long that connection has lasted. And it has been unceasing. And even if I don't see them for a long time, there is a bond and a connectedness that will never be able to lapse between us. And that came from the summit, the work leading up to the summit, the work we were doing before that, but all the work that we've done since then, is the connectedness that we have to each other and to our work, and to the people that we serve. And the things that they taught me, the things that they exposed me to, the places that I went with them, the things that they showed me that made my world so much bigger. And though I was based in New York, and Peggy Shepard and I and our friend Chuck Sutton were leading a fight in New York, somehow we thought we were the only people that were in that fight. And walking in that ballroom that day at the Washington Court Hotel in Washington, D.C., and seeing all of these people was just the most amazing, affirming, empowering thing to know that we were not alone. So I want to just say how amazing it is to see all of these sisters. And there is a person who is watching, Mia Yoshitani. Mia now leads the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, but at the summit, Mia was, I think she was 19, maybe she was 20. And she was a member of the drafting committee that wrote and produced the Principles of Environmental Justice. So from day one, we were practicing multiracial, multi-generational, geographically diverse, hemispherically diverse, as Mililani said. We were trying to set a frame and a pace for the way that we wanted to live with each other, the way that we wanted to be in community with each other, but the way that we wanted this society to flow. It hasn't always gone the way that we thought it should go, but it's not because we didn't tell them, right? And it's not because we didn't write it down. The other thing I would say about our work is that we have used every medium to tell our stories. We have used every medium to lift up our communities. We've written books, we've written articles, we've done art, we've done music, we've done culture, we've done theater, we've done spoken word, we've done calling on the ancestors and bringing it forward generation to generation. we have tried to tell, not only in this hemisphere and in this quote unquote country, but we've tried to tell the world. So the last thing I would say is that we thought we were coming together to talk about what was happening in our own communities. But it turns out we were coming together to change the world. And we did that.
Indeed. And with that, we can go to the second question. Everything you all have said has been so powerful, and coming together, even as we had our meetings to talk about this, is just such a great reunion, right? Because even though we've all known each other and one another for more than 30 years, it's, as you said, Bernice, you can come together and not see each other necessarily every year, and the connections are there. But in some of the stories that about the summit are the stories about developing the 17 principles themselves. And so if you can speak about the principles and about that process. And so Bernice, let me go ahead and stay with you and talk about that process of creating the 17 principles. And I'm gonna go to whoever of you want to answer that question.
Okay. So again, another momentous thing that we didn't know was going to have the impact and the power that it had when we were going through the exercise. But, so we had a process within a process. So the big conference is going on in the ballroom most of the time. Then we had breakout rooms. But the drafting committee was comprised of, we had representatives for each region of the country and racial and ethnic representation, youth representation. That's how Mia and another extraordinary young woman, Kikanza Ramsey, happened to be on the committee. But we tried to make that committee as representative as we could and as democratic as we could of all the people who were in attendance. And we were in a little room off the ballroom. And we were in that room essentially for 3 days, night and day. And the only time we would come out was when we ate. And in the evenings, when we would bring the day's deliberations to the full body and ask the full body to debate the draft principles. And I remember constantly telling people, okay, this is not an exercise in wordsmithing. I don't know why I said that, because of course, everybody will then wordsmith every single word, every dot, every tittle, right? But I remember having this exchange with Leah Wise from Black Workers for Social Justice, who were based in Durham, North Carolina. And Leah got up at one point after I had said from the mic, okay, let's not wordsmith this. Let's make sure that the ideas that we want to project and the concepts are there, because we can come back and we can revisit this. And Leah got up and Leah said, no, we can't. We're not coming back and revisiting this again. What we put down is going to last forever. And I didn't think that that was true. I always thought that we would come back and revisit this document. I didn't think that 30 years hence, we would still be, standing on those same words, those same discussions, those same arguments that we had to make sure that it reflected what we wanted it to reflect. But I know that throughout my life and throughout my work, I have never been more proud of anything that I've ever done than that process. So one last story or anecdote. So we're going through the various issues, and then we get to the issue of indigenous land rights and sovereignty. And we all looked at each other and we're like, well, I'm not an expert. You're not an expert. We sort of went around the room and we're like, yeah, no. And just as we were having that conversation, Tom Gotu from the Indigenous Environmental Network happened to walk by on the balcony outside our room. And I jumped up and I went and I grabbed him and I said, Tom, come in here, we need you. And so he came in, we told him what we were struggling with. And he said, okay, let me go get somebody for you. I'll be right back. He goes off, he comes back in 10 minutes and he brings Mililani. And Mililani sits down at the typewriter and she knocks out that principle on indigenous land rights and sovereignty. We didn't talk about it. She just said, here, this is what we need to say. And it came out of her heart, it came out of her soul, it came out of her experience as an incredible attorney and human rights attorney. And she put that down like a laser from her heart, right? And so that's how that happened. But And I have always loved her. I have that memory in my mind of that moment and that time of grabbing Tom and Tom grabbing Mililani. And that is just an expression of who we are as a community, that we had everything we needed in that space. Everybody might not have been there, but everybody brought all the people that they represented in that room with them. And Mililani certainly spoke for all the indigenous, tribal, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander people who had been left out of this conversation. And it is one of the most powerful principles in the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice. But it was an extraordinary experience, and it is the most incredible process of democratic decision-making that I have ever been a part of. I've been to national convenings all over the world. I've been to presidential nominating committees. I've been to all kinds of stuff, but nothing was as democratic and as true representation of a people's interest as the development of the principles of environmental justice was today.
So for those of you who may not know, they're out of the summit, obviously came these 17 principles, and you can easily find them. We've got them up on our front page in a blog there, but you can find those 17 principles. Who else wants to share next? Dr. McLean, do you want to?
I'll go on, Dr. Go ahead, Dr. McLean.
Go ahead, Susanna.
Well, yeah. Well, this is Susanna Manson. I was very honored to be one of the people who were sitting at the tables drafting the principles of environmental justice. And I'll tell you that I prayed, and I prayed with the group. And I remember praying with the group and not with those that were in writing, but the group that we came with, praying to the Creator to give me the insight and the patience and the knowledge and the understanding to work with others to bring forth these principles of environmental justice. And I really felt the spirituality when I entered the room because it was about words. It was about words. You have to be very careful about words and what the words, because words mean a lot. But I think that what was so beautiful about the words and getting to the right words were that people was very open about it. Okay, so you want to say this. Okay, let's put it this way. But everybody was very open and patient about, okay, how do we make it? How do we make that thought be the one that we want on the paper, right? And I think it was so beautiful because, like Bernice said, it was a multiracial, multicultural, group, multi-language, and their beliefs were in Mother Earth. It very much was grounded on Mother Earth, and that again, that it was nature and humanity interwoven and interlocked and inseparable. And I think that knowledge, that wisdom and that knowledge came from all the people of color, all the indigenous people that I would not find in other circles in mainstream environment or anything, is the spirituality and our connection to the Mother Earth, and how do we create that balance, and how do we work together, and how do we protect the earth, because we know if we protect our mother, our mother protects us. And so we had a really deep understanding, and I think that that's why the principles of environmental justice are still thriving today, and that it is a very historical document that is still embraced by so many people and even the next generation, because it comes from that multiracial, multicultural understanding of people of color.
Who wants to take it next, Pam or Dr.
I want to
McLean?
jump in there and build on what Susanna said, because I came in late in the planning of the summit. And so a lot of the roles had already been assigned and people were doing things already. And so I came and we had to kind of figure out, this is going to be an in and an out game. So you had this crew of folk, the posse who was actually doing the writing and the crafting and the thinking. And like Susanna, I decided, well, I'm gonna craft a role, I'm gonna be a prayer. So I had a crew of young people and we were sending the vibes, we call, to the folks who was doing the writing. So we were outside engaged in chanting and praying and singing and bringing down the ancestors, asking that this crew of people, that their minds be melded together in such a way that they would come out with a product that reflected all of us and then would be life lasting. So while they were in there sweating and wordsmithing, and the beautiful thing is that they would come back and present it, and like Vernice said, it'd be this democratic, oh, what about this? And we'd debate the ideas and throw this in and throw that in, but people were generally receptive because there was this in and outside game where it was not just a set of material principles, but that they were rooted and grounded in our spirituality. Because we knew that if they were rooted and grounded in our spirituality, they would work. And they would be here past our lifetime. And that's what we were looking for. And today, almost in every conference, every convening, in every packet, you'll find those 17 principles. And the preamble is the thing that is so awesome because it brought together the thinking and the reflection of what we were going through, but what we were aiming at. What is it that we wanted to leave? And you know, this new word is sustainability. What could we leave that would be sustained and still usable in 2021 and beyond? And so for me, even though I wasn't on the inside, we had a space where people could take on assignments that they knew had to be done. And it wasn't an I thing. It was a we thing.
Yeah, it was never an I thing. Yeah.
And it demonstrated our concept. Our name is Harambe. And Harambe means let's pull together. So we got to always chant, Harambe, Harambe, Harambe. Let's pull together. And so that is the power that is embedded in those principles, that it not only reflect our material reality, but who we are as a spiritual people, and how we work as a family to come up with the solutions that we know will work. And so that was the beauty of those principles, how they got developed, and then how they got approved, because the approval process was beautiful itself. And the jubilation, once they were approved, that showed that we had come together as a family and we had built something that was going to last.
Yeah, beautiful. Anyone else want to tackle that question, or should we go on to the next? We're going to come back and ask you some more about the principles, how you've used it. Jose, you want to take it?
Yeah. And you know, what's really cool too is that we're getting a lot of shout outs from people that have that were there at the first People of Color Summit, and then others that we worked with within this last 30 years. So right back at you. Hello. I'm glad you all are here. So the third question is, since this summit, how have you put those principles to work? I think that we heard a little bit about it, but you know, who would like to go first? So the question is, since the summit, how have you put those principles to work?
Pam, maybe you can talk about the work aspect.
Okay, the worker aspect. Okay, for me, the summit just really set me on a trajectory where I've really focused in on the workers of color and unfair choices that workers of color needing to face, unsafe conditions, or not being able to work at all. And so that has been for me a huge focus. So I've participated in a couple of landmark research projects with workers to be able to, where they uplift their own issues. They uplift in terms of their demands, and then conducted research with each other to identify what kind of policy they needed. And so two struggles, or two particular projects that I'm very proud of, is the work to be able to reduce workload for women, and mainly immigrant women. And this started with the room cleaners throughout the country that I did work with. And as a result of that research, if on union contracts now for room cleaners, workload reduction is a huge victory, and now has been also been promoted by in places where unions don't exist. So I'm very proud of that in terms of the role that women played in identifying what policies they needed in that area. And the other is work in Chinatown, where the restaurant workers conducted their own study, and being able to uplift the conditions and the relationship of work and their health. And as a result of those findings, now we have, out of a small little place in San Francisco, Chinatown, now we have like the whole wage and hour victories that have spread all across California and now across the country. And I don't think people really know that a lot of that came out of those 6 square blocks in San Francisco. And finally, one of the areas that I've been able to focus in on was to be able to help co-found the Just Transition Alliance. I'm also very proud of that work as well. But wherever there are places where we can express our radical love that challenges capitalism, I think that that's what we stand for. And these are just some of the things that I'm proud of, as well as being invited to Standing Rock from Chinatown, and bringing a delegation of Asians to Standing Rock, and then coming back to the Bay Area and hooking up that way with local indigenous organizations, and just mobilizing thousands to uplift the situation with building of pipelines and the violence against women and children. And to be able to uplift that, stopping the building of pipelines, exposing the role of man camps, protects indigenous women and children. And I think that is one of the more recent that I've been proud of.
Yeah, Pam, thank you for that. I mean, again, a lot of people, this was 30 years ago, but it doesn't mean that our work ended. Our work continues. Thank you for that example. Who else wants to talk about how, since the summit, how have you put those principles to work? And we did have some interest from Dr. McLean and Melalani, but if others as well.
Well, I'll just be real quick. We use them not only in terms of with our own communities and our own neighborhoods and in our own work, but we use them to try to transform the polluters. We try to beat them over the head with these principles and show them that they have value and they should learn them and abide by them. So often we do include them when we're talking with the governmental officials, because we try to treat them as human beings, even though many times they act the opposite. And I'll turn it to my sister.
I had mentioned earlier that I think one of the most critical and positive global outcomes we had was the inclusion of the environmental principles into the human rights rubric when the UN Declaration was passed in 2007. But I also wanted to touch briefly upon what we really learned when we left that summit. Example was that we went there and we knew at that time that Hawaiian women had the highest rate of breast cancer in the United States of America. And we were being told that it was because we had junky diets and bad lifestyles like smoking. But when we went to the summit, it was there that we met others saying, have you taken a look at where the cancer clusters are? We weren't even thinking about cancer clusters. We had all the data on breast cancer. So we came back and we put that data together in a different way to look at cancer clusters. By working with those that we had met, they pointed out, here's some examples of potential causes of cancer and leukemia. And lo and behold, the US military industrial complex appears on the screen. And when we did the overlay with the breast cancer, we could see the relationship. It was the principles of environmental justice and working with others that actually showed us how to use data and develop tools so that we could link the diseases of our people with these toxic sources. We came across some situations that didn't fit that rubric. The situation relating to military testing all over Hawaii. When they come back and say, there's no problem here, we're doing the testing hundreds of miles away from where you live. It didn't quite fit the rubric in the community. But again, we reached out to those that we had met. Again, we reached out to those who were in the link, the system that we had put together there in Washington, and they told us, don't buy that poor excuse. You have to do better work. What is the military testing and where is it being done? You tell us they're testing Davy Crockett missiles. Did you know that they have a radioactive footprint? You show us a map that they're testing way up on the top of your sacred mountain. But each time it rains, the radioactivity seeps into your water source. Each time it rains, those radioactive stones and particles wash right down to the area where your people are planting and gathering. Well, you know, these were the expansive tools that we learned about because the foundation, the environmental principles for justice was there. And then the follow-up with the help of our dear brothers and sisters, helped us to acquire the tools to link the negative health impact with the existence of inappropriate military and multinational uses. And it also showed us how we cannot just consider the impact, the environmental impact on our people and our lands by simply looking at cancer clusters in an urban map. We have to include the processes of Mother Earth herself. And in that way, we now trace toxicity through the movement of the Pacific Basin tides. We see that with nuclear problem in Japan. Shortly thereafter, we have mutated fish washing up on the shores of Hawaii and California. Very thankful for that. And that was certainly something that evolved because of what we put in place there so many years ago. The principles of environmental justice are key that open a door, but our own diversity and our strengthened network is what provides us the step-by-step strategy to address it and overcome it.
Bernice, Susana, or Gail?
Yeah, this is Susanna. I wanted to add that Poder has used all the principles of environmental justice and it continues to use it. And I'll just give one quick example that we oppose the destructive operations of the multinational corporations and our right to be free from ecological harm. those multinational corporations were Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, Citgo, Texaco, and Gulf Coast Estates, and they had developed what is called a tank farm. But from those corporations, they were emitting benzene, toluene, a lot of cancer-causing emissions. And so we worked and organized with the community to address these issues. We put together, with the help of Dr. Sylvia Herrera, the Tank Farm Citizens Monitoring Committee, which then we brought representatives from all the different neighborhoods and organizations to sit at the table. And we were at the table, and then we would bring the health department, EPA, the county, the city. They were part of the audience. And so it was a way of flipping the tables and saying, no, you're accountable to the community, and here's the questions, and you've got to bring the answers to what is really happening, right? And so we were able, through that whole process of accountability, from addressing the contamination to looking at policies, to looking at the root cause of what it brought all this industrial hazardous facility in our community, is zoning, how that racist policy has allowed industry to be adjacent to communities, because it was communities. There were 5 schools within a 1-mile area, so people were really being exposed to the contamination. But then we also made sure during that process that the victims got compensated, that there was compensation for what had happened to the families. And not only that, we followed up with the cleanup process. And I'll tell you that monitoring the cleanup process of the 52-acre farm took us 15 years of monitoring to make sure finally that they were given the bill of health, that the area was clean. And so when I say looking at the principles of environmental justice, those are our guiding principles whether we address BF5, the second most largest waste management corporation that was in the Gardens neighborhood, creating a mini landfill and hazardous, whether it was the Holly Street power plant that was bringing electric magnetic fields, pollution, all of the stuff that we see is using those principles of environmental justice, of making sure that people are at the table, holding the government accountable, changing the policies, making sure we're protecting our Mother Earth, our waters, and our air. And so we're really glad that the principles of environmental justice are our guiding path to continue to work for our justice.
All right. Bernice, Gail?
I would add,
Start.
I would add that we took those principles literally, and we went back and infused them into our work, into our organizing, into our environmental education, community-based environmental education, training folks in our community to understand what the environmental threats were they were facing and how we had to mobilize ourselves to be able to direct what was happening in our communities, but make different kinds of choices and be in those decision-making places. We took that straight from the principles, but also the notion of participatory community-based research. We brought that back from the summit. It would take us a few more years to evolve that, but we knew that we had to be in charge of how data and the narrative that was put forward about our communities were shaped. We took that from the principles, and I find it odd today that there's so many young people who are so turned on and turned up about environmental justice, but how few of them have ever seen the principles of environmental justice or understand that those are the principles of engagement and the rules of engagement and the foundation upon which we stand. And so, I'm always talking about them, and I think we need to sort of reintroduce the principles into all of our dialogues about environment and environmental policy and climate change and climate justice, so people know that it doesn't just come out of thin air. We worked hard to lay this foundation, and we intend to stand on this foundation, as long as we are in this space, as long as we are doing this work, as long as we have breath. Those are the things that will guide us in all of the ways that we work.
I would just
Gail, please.
say that everybody's comments are very important and relevant, and that in my own example, the life work I've done, we've tried everything from litigation to policy to community organizing. I mean, we've tried everything. And one thing I will say about the EJ principles is that hold back and look at the big picture. What did it provide? It provided a power analysis, really a global power analysis is what that provided. Those principles can be broken down and used for each community. But I think the most significant takeaway of the environmental justice principles is it pulls you out of your local crisis. It makes you look at the world on a bigger level. And the fact that the United States may have unilateral power, but it's very contingent upon like the different countries that we work with for markets, for war. But it made you see that the world is very interconnected. And that power analysis is a takeaway that young people really need today. Mm-hmm. That's a critical tool to be able to see that, like in my case with the Indian tribes, we own a lot of land. We still own the vast majority of the resources in this country, whether it's the energy reserves, whether it's the wildlife. We own that. The tribes have held on to that. And so looking at some of our tribes, like, some of our tribal reservations are as big as states. So we've had to take that power look, a big picture look, and how we're going to survive in a country that is all about taking and exploiting, and then creating this internal dissension where everyone's fighting each other. That's a power play, and it's worked to a great degree. So I say that the principles provide our young people a much broader picture, and it's a power analysis of the world. Thank you.
Wow, this is really awesome, and a lot of the comments in the chats are about the so happy to hear elders speak on some of these issues. And I want to do a shout out to all the young organizers that are here with us today at all. We really obviously appreciate enjoying you in the work that you are doing. But I think it's also important as we have this conversation to ask about what are some of the victories of the EJ movement. I know some of that has been embedded in what you all have been saying, but if we can have folks talk about what are some of the victories. And who wants to take that one first? Gail, you want to just go?
I can jump in with the work that we've done. Different administrations come and go, and sometimes you don't know if they're Republican or Democrat, right? It seems like they still have the same MO, which is taking whatever we have left, right? So we've been fighting administrations for years in our area. And the reason is because we sit on top of some of the richest, hottest burning coal in the United States. So this was a time when this was probably the early, I think it was like the early 90s, the largest coal sale in the United States went up for auction. The largest public coal sale. And that's a point I want to make to everybody. When they talk about a public coal sale, public lands, people don't realize that you own them. Every one of us own these lands and these resources when it's public lands. But nobody ever tells us that. People aren't educated to know that. So when they say it's the largest federal public coal sale in the United States, what does that mean? It's a land area from South Dakota all the way along Montana's southern border to Wyoming, opening it up for coal mining. And for who? For their political buddies to get at fire sale prices, like still going for 17 cents a ton for coal. Can you imagine if we own the coal, why are we letting it be sold for pennies? because somebody's going to get rich off of it, right?
Mhm.
And then so we halted that federal public coal sale, and we used everything within our power. And you know what was significant too is that the white ranchers realized that they had to come on board. If they wanted water rights, if they wanted to continue their leasing of lands for their cattle, who was important to them in this strategic litigation and legal challenge was the tribes. So they had to come in and, as we always tell them, you have to come in and cowboy up, buddy. They had to come in and realize that they're not the decision makers, that you're going to listen to us and you can ride our coattails. But right now, you put some money in for expert witnesses. So we won that big federal public coal sale. And then what comes along right behind that is no time to even celebrate and take a breath, right? Coal bed methane development. Another administration gets elected. This time it's a woman governor of Montana, first woman governor. And she says she's going to be the lapdog of industry. Who the heck says that? They're going to be the lapdog of industry. She's the governor. Anyway, she says that, leases out all this land up in our area. Again, state, federal, public lands came together, land owned by us, methane gas companies. And anyway, I was really active in that for my tribe. And this governor invited me along on a tour. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to go. So I showed up over there. And she said that she was going to prove to all the media. She hiked down to this area where all the water was, the wastewater from these methane fields was going to be released. And she puts a cup out there and she drinks it. This was the kind of thinking she had, like the lapdog of industry is going to drink this wastewater of methane. And so I was standing there watching this crazy governor do this. And I was standing by a guy, and he was one of the owners of one of the largest methane companies. And he told me, I'm from Armenia. He said, I love this country. I come to this country just a few years ago. And he said, all this gas, all this methane, free for anyone. I bid on it. I want it. And now I am a millionaire. And he said, and everything is free for the taking. This woman is just giving it away to anybody that wants it. And I was standing there thinking, this is like surreal. This is like I'm in some kind of a movie or something where this governor is drinking the water, the wastewater. This man is saying that everything's free. And who owns all this land and who's going to be impacted is my tribe, the Cheyenne. We're being surrounded with 20,000 methane gas wells. They're draining our water, and people are getting rich, but we are not in the equation at all. So we went to bat on that case again. But what I'm telling you is that the battles just keep coming. They keep growing. They're getting bigger. And that what my career, I feel like we've held them off. We've just held them off so that we at least can still have a homeland. We still have water that we can drink. We still have a homeland where the elk migrate, although a lot of times the elk get lost because the thumping of the methane companies was getting them all lost. They didn't know where they were going. But the fight is still here and bigger than ever because you got climate change that has heated up now. But all of our work is a legacy of preparing and prepping for what right now is a real crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I want to talk about some of the victories. This is Susana. I think one of the biggest victories of the EJ movement was actually the first National People of Color Summit. To me, that was a victory in itself, where over 300, representatives from organizations from 50 states and then sovereign nations all got together to talk about all the different issues impacting us. And that was also the unification of the network. The Southern Organizing Committee for Economic and Social Justice, SOC, the Indigenous Environmental Network, IEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, APEN, the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice Needs, and many, many other grassroots organizations The other victory was the establishment of NEJAC, the National Environmental Justice Council in 1993, where people of color were actually at the table, looking at all the policies and advising the government. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize, that the reason we were not at the table is because we couldn't afford to be at the table. It was always in Washington, and that's expensive. So for the first time, we got the government to start sponsoring grassroots people, paying for their flight, paying for their hotel rooms, and then providing meals. That had never existed before. The other thing was the adoption of the Executive Order 12898, federal actions to address environmental justice in minority population and low-income populations, that was passed by President Clinton. The other was establishment of environmental justice offices at the state level and the creation of environmental justice task force at the municipal levels. And the other one was challenging the permits for hazardous facilities in numerous states, and closing a lot of the hazardous facilities. Also, the universities then making or adopting or creating environmental justice curriculum. That was another big victory, and I just talk about it more on the national scope instead of the local scope. But I think that these are the things that the environmental justice, some of the victories that the environmental justice was able to move and create and establish.
Thank you, Susanna. Who else wants to take that question? Dr. McLean?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dr. McLean.
I appreciate everything that everybody has said, and I look at those as victories, and there's a whole lot that we can say. But I think that we have to be a little bit more hard with ourselves. Because let me give you an example. For 30 years, our organization and our communities worked to strengthen the National Environmental Policy Act, which gave us the right to be at the table when any environmental decision was being made. It calls for an environmental impact process and statement, and all the community be involved in all of that. And we were using it quite effectively, and we were doing a lot to strengthen the regs and the rules and all of that. And that was 30 years of work. And in 4 years, Trump came in and literally gutted all of 30 years worth of work. And I'm going to tell you, it has impacted me severely, because 30 years of my life being away from my children and my grandchildren, being on the road to teach communities how to use this NEPA, how to use it to be at the table and to impact and influence the decision. And in 4 years, this man came along and literally destroyed all of that. Now we're in the process of trying to put it back together. But one of the things that we are all going to have to really grapple with, especially in regards to policies and statutes and laws and regulations and stuff, anything that depends on the federal government, we have to be very careful, because what's given is so easily taken. And I'm just using NEPA as an example, but you can see it in so many other areas. So we're going to have to put those thinking caps on that we had at that first summit. And as elders and as mentors and as young people who have come behind us, because one of the things that came out of that summit is we have much more young people in the environmental justice movement now. And they are giving their due to us, saying that because of us, because of our work, because of our struggle, they were inspired and they're going to carry it on. They're going to carry it on, and that's all good. But I think we have to look strategically at once we get good policies in place, how do we make sure that they are complied with and they enforced and we can deal with them? But how do we stop them from just snatching them away from us when we have worked so hard to get them? Sister Gail, you hit it right on the head. This thing has only just begun, because with the pandemic and the syndemic, And the police still killing our people left and right. My grandson did a research project 5 years, from 2010 to 2015. The police in the United States killed 1,267 Black people, and we didn't know anything about it. The ones that hit the notoriety in the national news and everything, like, you know, Brother George and the sister and Brother Arbor, all of those, but those thousands of people who are killed on a daily basis, we ain't been able to do nothing about it. And so that has complicated, let's say. And the COVID has brought out things that we knew was going on. And it has showed us how it still goes on. So how do we continue this fight? Because we don't got no choice. This is our assignment. So we're going to continue to struggle, Gail. We're going to continue to struggle, Sister Bernice, Hosanna, Jose. But how do we do it in such a way that the policies that we work for so hard, that really errs to the side of the people and attempts to transform this society and how we do business? How when we don't go to the polls and we don't vote certain people in, that the people who come in just negate at the federal, and I'm talking state and local level as well. And I'm excited about the little victories I've seen in our organization. But I just have to admit to my sisters who I've been with for 30 years that I'm having a struggle. I'm really having a struggle as to how I continue at age 73 to continue to do this work in such a way that it makes a difference, that we can continue to push the environmental justice principles, because they are so important. And yes, Sister Bernice, there are a lot of young people who don't know about them, but there's a lot of young people who do. And so how do we bring those two sectors together, who know and who don't know, and put them together and work with us, old gals, sexy chicks, whatever we want to call ourselves, and you too, Jose. How do we come together again to try to put in place things that are long lasting, like the EJ principle? I'm just scared about this policy stuff, ladies.
Mm-hmm.
It's real scared, I have to admit to you. Some days, I just don't want to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to fight anymore. I'm so tired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so tired. And I have to go into my spiritual self to get strength. And sometimes I want to call on y'all and I can't even call you because I'm so wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a reality, is that we have struggled for 30 years and some of us are, we're kind of tired. How do we reinvigorate ourselves, and how do we share the mantle and all of that stuff, so that the real victory we're looking for, and I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, I wish it would, but I guess I'm going to have to let my great granddaughter, which I just got, I'm praised, thank God we got her, that she'll continue on, and I'll be looking on from heaven trying to give us some strength. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that I know we have some beautiful victories, but they done some bad stuff to us in the last few years. I'm sorry after going off that.
No,
we sharing, and y'all my family, so I gotta tell you.
Yeah,
keeping it real, keeping it real. Bernice, you wanna?
Yeah, I think I don't want to, well, I want to first validate everything that Mildred has said, because it's a mixed bag, right? But if I look back from where we were to where we are, we have transformed, reshaped, reimagined the conversation domestically and globally about what environmentalism is. And that is rooted in people's suffering. It's rooted in the interconnectedness of defending our natural resources as hard as we're going to defend our people, right? And that it's not just about the natural resources, which is where we entered this conversation. And the fact that we talk about people at all, that we talk about and center in a policy conversation or a legal conversation or, a treaty conversation, the rights of people to determine their own destiny. People have been working on that for millennia, but we put it on blast. We put it on blast, and we were not negotiating our own humanity. And I think that has transformed the conversation in this country and the world over about who has a right to drive and shape and even imagine what environmental policy and natural resource policy will be about. So and we are not 100% there. Mildred is completely right about that. But we have come such a mighty long way from a conversation where our federal government disregarded us, discounted us, didn't see us, didn't value our lives. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen as regularly as it used to happen. And we have prevailed in the courts. I want to lift up Native Action. Gail is killing it, was killing it through Native Action and so many other legal things that we did. We've reshaped the conversation in this country about public health, right? And environmental health, and how environmental exposure drives adverse health impacts. It's not our diet. It ain't pork chops, right? It ain't collard greens. It ain't fatback. Now salt is a killer, but not as much as being exposed to radioactive waste, right? Not as much as being exposed to tritium or benzene on a constant basis. We've elevated those issues. We had a conference in, what year was that? It was when they signed the Executive Order on Environmental Justice, 1994, reimagining the federal research paradigm about how the entire federal government goes about doing research and looking at environmental drivers of adverse health impacts. We have transformed the conversation about environmental policy. Have we been victorious every step of the way? No, we haven't. But we certainly have driven a complete transformation of how we think about these issues. So I want to lift up one particular victory for West Harlem Environmental Action. When we came to the summit, Peggy Shepherd and I, we were in the midst of trying to figure out what was happening in our community in terms of asthma. We were having a crisis, our own pandemic from asthma, and we didn't know why. From then until now, we have done research, we have done household asthma surveys, we have done partnerships, we have gotten research partnerships funded by the National Institutes of Environmental Health Science. Peggy was one of the first community-based people to be a co-principal investigator on a federal piece of research. But at the end of the day, we needed to know what was killing our people. And we found out that it was particulate pollution, and that we had the highest rate of exposure to particulate pollution of any community in the United States, the highest incidence of asthma, the highest level of premature death from asthma. That is no longer our narrative. That is no longer true about our community, because we fought the fight to, first of all, to get people to recognize y'all are killing us from this transportation system. So let's rethink the system. Let's rethink its design. Let's rethink its fuel sources. Let's rethink how we determine what land use happens, what goes through somebody's community, who you decides lives are of value and whose are not. That has happened for us in West Harlem. We have fought that fight. Last week, we celebrated our 33rd anniversary as a freestanding, community-based environmental justice organization. And the most important thing I think we did was to fight to clean the air in our community so it would stop killing us in our sleep, in our lives, in our schools, in our churches, at our jobs, in our homes. That is the most powerful thing. We've done a lot of things. And you can go look on our website and see all the things we've done. But to me, that's the most important victory that we have achieved.
You know, thank you, Bernice. And speaking of Peggy Shepherd, she is on the call here today. And so big shout out to you, Peggy. We're going to do a couple of more of these events. And in the next one, we're going to have Peggy along with Tom Goldtooth that was mentioned earlier, Richard Moore, and some other folks. But let me turn it back to you, Jose, for the next question. You're on mute.
I just realized I'm on mute. And I was having a great conversation with all of you. So one of the things that I think hasn't made the cut today, that I think is paramount in our movement as well, is the fact that we speak for ourselves. Right? I think we've always said that. We've always made sure that people understand that. So moving forward, that still works. It's still very tangent. And so I wanted to go into the next question, but I just wanted to take a little bit of a timeout to mention that. Now I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping here, because Teresa, do we want to go to question 5 or skip 6 and 7 because we're running out of time?
We can come back to 5 if we
okay.
If we want to, but then I think 6 was mine though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which I want to ask because I wanted to point out something, or I can turn it back to you. Let me point out something, and I'll turn it back to you to ask it. So you all have seen the photo that we've used for the flyer for this event. And that photo has in it 3 of our panelists, Mildred McClain, Mililani Trask, and Gail Small. So I think it's really important to note that these were photos of women from 30 years ago. These women are here with us today. And I think that growth of us as women and our movement as women is really part of the history of the struggle as well. So with that, Jose, go ahead and ask the question.
So given that, I think that's a great segue to the next question, which was, what made women so central to the movement? And so please.
I can respond to that, Jose. This is Gail. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can. Gail.
There's a song that our tribe has, and I think it says a lot. You know, a lot of things in our people. Like you're in a real struggle, like we are now. Like, you know, our sister Mildred expressed it very eloquently. I feel that pain, and when your back is against the wall, which most all of us have been there, you know. My mother always had a saying, you know, to us, my sisters. There's 5 sisters in my family. And she always said that you're going to get knocked on your knees in this world and you get back up. But if you have to, you crawl, but you never give up. So that's one of those sayings. But the saying that came to my mind as Mildred was talking is the Cheyenne song. And it translates to when the hearts of the woman are on the ground, then it is over. No matter how strong the bullets or how warrior our people are. So the hearts of the woman must never be on the ground. That's a very profound saying. And there's also another saying. I reach for like history and song and parable when I am in that situation. And there's another one that says a lot. You know, only the stones, only the rocks stay on earth forever. Use your best abilities. So those are like the framework that give me strength, sustenance to continue on. And as a woman, one of the co-conveners at that gathering, you know, I really sensed the importance of what we were doing, what we were representing. And I often pulled in people like Wilma, Mililani, Dana, whoever was around me. And I would say, hey, this is, you know, I need your input on this. Come with me. Because I'm the only woman here that's a co-convener. So I pulled people in to help me. And I say that today too, because the question I pose as a woman, of everything we've done, what could we have done? What could our life and career have been if we had the funding and the power to do what we wanted to do? You know, like many of you, I wear many hats. I was hustling, raising money I was carrying 3-4 jobs at a time. I was serving on my tribal government. I ran for office. I was wearing about 4 or 5 hats at the time. I never had stable funding, ever. I was raising 4 kids on the reservation, plus large extended family. My brothers all in prison, sent to prison, the prison pipeline, the deaths of our tribal members. So all that is happening in a time when you're trying to protect a homeland surrounded by massive energy development. And I say that because we're there again. Look at the stacking of the federal courts. The remedy that has been tossed out there is that we need more appointees to the Supreme Court because it is so stacked against us right now. But who has the courage and the power to make that happen? You look at what's happening right now with the breakdown in the federal government. We can't get an infrastructure bill passed that has significant money for my tribe, for Indian reservations. We have no water pipeline developments in our country. Our people still have outdoor toilets, people. We sit in the richest county in the state of Montana because of the coal tax base, and we have elders using outdoor toilets. Imagine that. And then you look at the prison system that is taking our men. Why are all our men sitting in these federal and state prisons? Because of the unjust federal sentencing guidelines, right? The suicide rates that are occurring, the drug epidemic that is pouring into our reservations to keep everybody drugged up and hopeless. But I look at we live on meat. My people, we're subsistence people. We live on elk and deer. For the last year and a half, I have been going to stores to buy bullets for my brothers and the male members of my tribe to hunt. There are no bullets, people. There are no shells. There are no guns in the stores. Go to Walmart and figure it out. Put 1 and 1 together. Who is buying up the guns in this country? Who is buying up the bullets? I go to Walmart, and every time I go there, I say, hey, do you have any bullets? My brother has a 270. We have a 30-06 elk. It's elk hunting season. We got to get out there. None. And so there is a war brewing in our country. There is a civil war brewing. And if we don't open our eyes to the short term, the impact to our communities can be devastating, as well as the long-term vision of our courts being stacked. As many of you know, our remedy is always to run to the federal courts. Now that is no longer an option. So where do we go? And these are real serious questions, but I believe strongly the safety of our people is in critical and paramount importance right now. I live in Montana, and I see the anger, the so-called loss of privilege that they're feeling, the browning of America that is driving this fear. But again, I say we're getting ready for winter. We have no bullets. We can't even hunt no more. We're going back to the bow and arrow days just to get meat on the table.
Thank you for that. And I want to call in my teacher, Hamtali. Any kind of reflections on that?
And we're talking about question number 6 in terms of the women.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, what has already been said, I can ditto it. I just wanted to add this one piece in working with women as a union organizer and as a community organizer, that I have found that many of the women, well, actually majority of the women are doing this work, but the husbands and the children don't necessarily know what they're doing. I will be at like a union meeting and I'll be talking, and then I'll just mention about making sure that the women have time to go home and cook and do the homework with their children and all of this. And at one meeting, I raised like, can we get, what about like getting support from the children or the husband? Can the husband cook for you tonight? Or can the kids like help you with some of the chores? And basically, many women just said no. They don't know what I'm doing here at these meetings. And so what we did was, because I was working with room cleaners, we created this door hanger. You know how you have door hangers when you go to the hotels and you put it on your door? So we created a door hanger for them to bring home to talk about, I need your support. Can you help me with chores, with the dishes, with cooking, and I'm working hard, so our family can have decent wages and benefits. And so we created these elaborate role plays and this graphic, this thing that they could take home and give to their family. And so at the next meeting, I said, so how did it go? Did you use the door hanger, the role play? They go, well, we used the door hanger, but you know what? I just said, hey, where do you think you're getting your health benefits? Where do you think I'm going to these meetings and I'm standing up for all of us? And it was like, whoa. And it was really good because they were getting support and encouragement. And that support and encouragement from their family was, really magnified the impact and the confidence and dealing with the fears of tackling the government, tackling the employer and other. So what I'm just wanting to add is, one thing in terms of women are women that each other right here, and the women that we organize. We always need to be able to support each other and give encouragement and be there if a phone call away, if that's all it takes, or checking in. Because I know when I get that kind of support, I made the energy that I thought I didn't have, all of a sudden, I find it. Mm-hmm.
And Jose, I want to add be real brief, so because I know we're running out of time. Yeah. But I think when you reflect on past movements and past struggles, you recognize that women have been the backbone of the movements of struggle. They fought for the right to participate equally in the economic, political, and social systems of our countries. Women get things done. They're the ones who organize fundraisers. They call up and they rally people to events. Women are not afraid of the footwork. When women are biologically and socially the creator of life, who by nurturing and building her family also builds the life of the community around her. That's why women are very central to the movement. Thank you.
And when we were teeing up this question, I just want to mention, if folks remember when we were teeing up this question on our call, when it comes to environmental injustice, when it comes to impacts from environmental degradation, climate, everything, it usually most often falls on women. The issue, the taking care of families, the doing other things, the impact itself falls on women. And that's why I think women are central to this movement as well. Nolani, we'll go with you last, but let's keep it short so we can get one last question in.
Short and sweet, my dear sisters and brother. I feel that we come to the point now when we talk about the future, where we should go. I think we need to consider seriously, isn't it time for the second summit? We're facing some challenging times in Washington, D.C., but this discussion shows me how much we have learned, how many victories we have had, and how we're struggling with dealing with changing times. I just want to say that one of the legacies that we have left is the hope of knowing what our initial gathering gave birth to. And as women, I just want to say, perhaps now we leave this, we move now to begin the planning for the second conference. I think it's time. Aloha.
Aloha.
You know, I think folks probably realize that we've got folks here from Hawaii, from Montana, from Savannah, Georgia, from Austin, Texas, from West Harlem, from New York, and what did I miss? And the Bay Area. So it's a great time, I think, Mililani, for folks to come together physically. And with that great segue, what looks like we have time for just this last question, and we're going to ask you to make your answers brief, and we'll ask everybody to answer it. Please say something about your work quickly, and then what is your call to action? Well, Bernice, let's go with you. Your image just showed up.
So my work has been to build, support, grow, invest in the capacity of grassroots organizations, of knowledge building, of research driven by communities, of transformative public policy that's centered around communities, always around communities. That's been my work. And I think what I've taken with me, Teresa, is wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, first of all, remember who I am and where I'm from. Remember the people who made it possible for me to do whatever it is that I'm doing, the people who poured their love into me, Dana Alston, Jean Sindab, Jean Gowner, who were particularly important to me in my growth and my development. And just never, ever, ever forget who you are and who you serve, no matter where you are or what you're doing. And if you can do that, you know, then you can keep the work moving.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I'm in Maryland these days, right outside of Washington, D.C.
I think I knew that. Thank you, Bernice. Next. Who wants to go next? Dr. McLean, Mildred, do you want to go next?
No time to be shy now. 30 years later.
I'm still working at the Harambe House. We're still organizing in communities throughout the state of Georgia and the Southeast region, and we try to represent the Southern voice in national and international arenas. I'm still working on training up young folk to take my place, as well as work beside me. Still working to fight all the things that we have been fighting for and trying to win. The thing that my call to action is in the song that I always sing before I leave any place. And it goes a little bit like this, Sister Bernice. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, watching up the freedom's land. So even though we might not have all the victories we want, we gonna keep on marching, keep on working until we win. And I'd say, Pamoja Tutashinde, together.
No, Mildred, I'm so happy to hear you sing, because that's one of the memories I have so often of hearing you sing. Yeah, so I'm so glad you sang today. Who wants to hit it next?
Well, I'll just get in real quick. This is Susanna. So under our climate health equity plan, we've got two major campaigns. One is a solar campaign, working to ensure that low income and people of color have access to solar energy. The other one is a Fair Fares movement campaign, because they're putting in 2 rail lines and that covers communities of color. But rail costs $7 a day for a day pass, whereas the bus costs $2.50 for a day of pass. And so what we're saying is that the rail has to equal the bus fare, $2.50. That this inequity and discrimination has got to stop, so that our people of color have access to rail. The other one, we have the Colorado River Conservancy, where we're looking at preserving, protecting, and restoring the Colorado River in the eastern part of where mostly communities of color are, where it's been sort of ignored. And then we're also challenging the land development code. We took them to court, we won, but the city of Austin is appealing the judge's decision, so that will continue. And we're also right now registering our elders and those that are have immune compromised to get their booster shots for the COVID-19. And that we continue with our Young Scholars for Justice, training the next generation of community leaders. And my call to action is for funders to fund grassroots, people of color and women-led organizations. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Pam, and I mean, environmental justice, environmental racism, I mean, it impacts everything. And I know what we know people, I don't feel that we need to be like an environmental organization to be mainly doing this, but I feel right now is that we need to turn all the organizations that people belong to, whether it's a parent-teacher organization, whether it's a food bank, or it's an art and culture group, or a labor union, or whatever. We need to help transform them into environmental justice organizations. And as an example, I was working with the Asian labor unions, and I said that, global warming is going to impact the cost of food, the cost of housing, insurance, healthcare, all of these different things. Global warming is going to impact whether workers can show up at work, because maybe there's a flood, maybe the road's been washed out, extreme heat, and all of these different things. For example, a trade union can work with their members to incorporate all of these protections into their membership, and organize protections that way. So I just wanted to help people think about, like, whatever groups people belong to. Hey, what do you think about the issue of global warming? How is your organization going to be taking up these issues? And global warming is right now, and cost of food is risen. So what do we do? So for me, my challenge or call to action is to transform every kind of organization or formation into an EJ organization.
Thank you, Pam. Gail?
I would say that it's important to acknowledge the ancestors who have come before us for us to be where we are today. So it's very important that we keep our knowledge alive, people. The knowledge that you have acquired and the knowledge that your ancestors have acquired is very important. We have to keep our knowledge and we have to keep our people alive. It's that simple. Keep our people alive. And then my call to action would be to step out of our comfort zones, step out of how we narrowly define our lives and our work, and think bigger. Think bigger. Even think bigger than the EJ movement. And we have to realize that we have to become the candidates. We have to run for elected office. I have done that. I have actually had to, we've been involved in Federal Voting Rights Act lawsuits up here just to get the Indian vote heard. So my call to action is to get your voice heard one way or another. Be a candidate, mobilize the vote, but most importantly, you've got to get your people out to vote, because we are in that 50-50 balance that things can get much worse, people. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mililani.
I had talked a little bit earlier about what I was doing with Gail in terms of one-on-one mentoring so that we could ensure the transmission of knowledge. When we started out 30 years ago and had that global environmental justice conference, we brought a great diversity of people together and laid a strong foundation. That is the key. I still believe that is the appropriate way forward. And I think that it's good to hear all of our individual ideas about a call to action. But I think our numbers combined show me that the time has come to issue from this group, from this effort, those who drafted and laid that foundation, now to issue the second call of action to bring people in. In Gail's program, it's one woman mentoring another. But when we had that conference, it was environmental leadership, every issue, every community, every race, every gender, and those in between. And I think that this global effort needs to issue another call to action. I can work with Gail, within our communities, but we need to issue a call for everyone so that we can have that intergenerational transmission of knowledge. I see your faces, my sister. Our hairs are all coming gray. Is it not time for those of us who were in a leadership position 30 years ago to transmit that to a whole new generation of younger women, steering younger programs and working with and facing challenges that are even more significant than what we had to deal with? And here I address the racism now that we see in the US Congress with Donald Trump and others. But I think that the intergenerational transmission of knowledge, if I can step out of my cultural little framework, perhaps it's time to bring it global again so that we can renew ourselves. And as we know, if Mao Zedong can say women hold up half the sky, I hear the real teaching in the words of Gail, that it's not over yet, my sisters, until the heart of women is on the ground. When I hear your voices, I hear Mildred, tears come to my eyes. But one thing it shows me is that our hearts are not on the ground and we are still very resilient. Time to assume the obligation to pass it on to the new group of environmental leaders, regardless the race, the creed, regardless where they live. Your comments show me that we are still very capable of being mentors in this movement.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to Jose to close us out and make a closing statement, I want to thank again Great Cities Institute and the Just Transition Alliance and the folks that helped us with preparing this event, and to all of you wonderful panelists. But I also want to acknowledge CAN TV, which is our local public access TV. They've been also taping this, so we are going to be able to make the video available both through our own taping, but also through the assistance of CAN TV. So we'll be in touch, and we'll be in touch with a subsequent event as well. But Jose, let me turn it over to you to close us out.
Yes, we can.
And if
yes,
the panelists will stay on. All right, yes.
So yes, we can. Yes, we can with CAN TV. No, that wasn't a pitch. That wasn't a commercial for CAN TV.
Oh.
But I'm messing with you. All right. So transportation and climate, funding, transforming organizations, knowledge and acknowledge where we're at, and knowledge transfer. Those things were said today in regards to putting a shout out to people to actually, keep us together. We've not been separated to the point where we're not working with each other. I think it's just making sure that we all tie back into the work that we've been doing. And I think it's all interrelated, as folks were talking about today. And I want to thank Pam, Susana, Dr. McLean, Melanie, Gail, Bernice, and Teresa for having this conversation today. I think it's really, really important for folks to understand that the environmental movement, our environmental issues didn't start yesterday, even though some might want you to think that. We started many, many years ago. Some might even say more than 500 years ago. So thank you all very, very much for being with us today. And it's been a pleasure and an honor for sure.